All right, let's get you straight to Flint, Michigan, where the former Iranian prisoner, Amir Hekmati, who was held in Iran for 4.5 years, this former United States Marine, 32 years old, is the first of the three former Iranian prisoners to leave Landstuhl Air Force Base in Germany, arriving back home to Flint, Michigan, which is, of course, facing issues of its own. We've got our own Margaret Brennan on the telephone with us now to talk about this. Margaret, this is significant. He is the first of those prisoners to return back to U.S. soil.
An emotional homecoming for Amir Hekmati, the former Marine. When he left the U.S. 4.5 years ago, went to Iran, he says, to visit his grandmother. And that's when he was taken. That's when he was arrested and put in the notorious Evin prison. For the past 4.5 years, his family has fought and fought hard. His sister, Sarah, I've interviewed a number of times. Sarah Hekmati and her husband have flown around the world, following around the American diplomats as they negotiated this landmark nuclear deal with Iran. At every meeting, they were pushing U.S. diplomats to please make the case to bring their brother and bring their son home. And for Amir himself, these 4.5 years were particularly harsh. He said in his comments to camera the other day, the very first time we heard from him, that at a minimum, his treatment was inhumane. As a former U.S. serviceman, he was viewed differently than some of the other Americans who have been held, and he was treated differently. But what we do know is that for him, this is going to be very emotional as well, because his father has been fighting for his life for years. His father has been very ill, battling brain cancer, and that has been a priority for the family. That his wish, as Sarah Hekmati says, her father's dying wish was to see his son again before he leaves, because they do not have a good prognosis for their father, and it has to mean so much, not only to him and to Amir, that they will be able to see him again. And hopefully within the next hours and minutes, as we look at this plane right now and wait for Amir to get off the plane.
Absolutely. As you say, Margaret, it will be an emotional homecoming for this former Marine. He was first convicted of espionage, and he was sentenced to death in Tehran. And as you point out, he was just visiting his family there when he was taken by the Iranians. That verdict was eventually overturned, but then he was convicted again of aiding a hostile country, the United States, presumably because he was a United States Marine.
Yes, Amir speaks Farsi. He speaks the language that most Iranians speak as their first language in Iran. He speaks that because of his family's roots in the country. He also speaks some Arabic, and when he was a Marine serving this country in Iraq, he used those language skills. And all of that experience and his deployment abroad certainly raised extra scrutiny among Iranian authorities. One of the things that is a bit tricky about dual nationals, or about people who are American who have roots in Iran, is that the Iranian government doesn't recognize your American citizenship. If your father was born in Iran, they view you as an Iranian. And this technicality adds to some of the very difficult situation when you're trying to negotiate for the release of an Iranian-American prisoner. All of the Americans who were finally released in that prisoner swap over the weekend either were dual nationals or had roots in Iran. Their family were Iranian, but they consider themselves very much American. Amir was born and raised in this country, and as he said when he came out to cameras the other day outside Landstuhl Medical Center where he had received treatment, he can't wait to get home, as he said, to the land of the free. And he thanked his fellow Marines and all the support that so many American servicemen have given to him just to keep his name in the headlines. Many Americans heard a lot about Jason Rezaian, the American journalist who was freed, in particular because he was a journalist, and the media community spent a lot of time talking about him. Amir's case didn't have the same national platform. His sister, Sarah, really personally made the appeal to keep his name out there, and the Marines themselves and some of the military community helped to keep his name out there. So 4.5 years, he was the longest held American who was returned home as part of this prisoner swap. And we're watching people get off this plane right now. We haven't quite seen Amir step off just yet. But
there he is.
Him.
There he is. There he is. Finally home in the United States after, Margaret, as you point out, 4.5 years in Iran.
Yeah, it has to be a surreal experience for him. He was only allowed limited communication with his family during his time in prison. He would occasionally be able to make a phone call.
Margaret, let's listen in. He's actually about to speak. Let's go ahead and listen.
It's great to be back in Flint, my hometown. I love this city. I love its people. They've been so good to me and my family, and we're very grateful. Happy to finally be home. It's been a very long road, a very long journey. Unfortunately, many people have traveled this road with me, but despite all the difficulties, thank God, thanks to everyone's support, everybody from the president, Congressman Kildee, everyday Americans. I'm standing here healthy, tall, and with my head held high. So I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate everyone's support once again.
Amir, what now?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
What now? What will you do now that you're home?
I plan to do very detailed interviews in the near future, and then I will definitely answer everybody's questions.
Welcome home, Amir. Thank you. ABC just welcomed you home. Guys, let's hang back, please. Hang back, please. A couple of them are with them at the documentary. Sorry, guys. Everybody back, please. I know it's tough, but everybody back. You're not in the documentary crew. Please hang back. Get back.
United States Marine Amir Hekmati held for 4.5 years in an Iranian prison, the longest held of the 3 that were just recently freed by Iran, finally home in Flint, Michigan. Margaret Brennan, our State Department correspondent, is joining me on the phone to talk about this. Margaret, in the very short remarks that he made there, Marine Hekmati, he thanked Representative Dan Kildee, the Michigan congressman who represents his district in Flint, Michigan, for keeping this issue, as you pointed out. It wasn't as high profile as Jason Rezaian, the Washington Post reporter, but it was very high profile in his state, in his community. His high school, Flint Central High School, petitioned the government, had rallies for him on social media. They really did support him, and this must be a great moment for them as well.
No doubt, and he returns to a hometown that has a lot of media in it right now, not only because of his return, because of, as well, some of the difficulty that Flint, Michigan has been going through with, what was a local issue that's now become a national scandal in regard to some pollution there of their water. So I'm sure they are happy to have a good news story. This is certainly that, to have Amir Hekmati come home right now. A good news story not only for the congressman who brought Amir's family to the State of the Union address this year to help add pressure to the White House to push for Amir's return and Amir's release. But for the local community, it's got to be a good day in what has been a difficult week for Flint.
Margaret, you mentioned something that is interesting, and I want to highlight it again for our viewers. Amir Hekmati, Jason Rezaian, Saeed Abedini, they are American citizens. Mr. Abedini is a naturalized American citizen, but the Iranian government does not recognize either dual citizenship or even if you are just simply an American and you don't hold citizenship in Iran. They think that if you are Iranian, it doesn't matter if you have an American passport. For them, you're an Iranian.
Yes, it's difficult. It's particularly difficult for men. They are treated, military-age men are treated differently when they go back to Iran, and they're considered differently by the government. And that's, one of the many. Iran is a very complex situation politically. That is just one of the many extra areas of complication when it comes to Americans traveling there, and certainly Americans with a military background traveling there, who, as Amir Hekmati was accused of a lot of things. As you say, he was sentenced to death. That his family argued had that overturned, but he was facing a 10-year prison sentence that he said he believed he was going to have to serve, and he served the better part of it. He was almost at 5 years there before he was actually allowed to come home. He said he didn't even believe it until he was on the plane and left Iranian airspace when he and the fellow prisoners began celebrating, really believing that they were going to go home.
Margaret, how much did this, as we see this image of Amir Hekmati just moments ago, speaking to reporters after he landed on U.S. soil for the first time in 4 years. How much did this nuclear deal with Iran play into the release of these 3 prisoners?
This isn't a tough question for the administration to answer directly. The latest explanation given is that the diplomacy and the nuclear deal allowed a window of opportunity to have these negotiations for the prisoner swap. That is, John Kerry and his fellow negotiators, Wendy Sherman among them, the people who hammered out this nuclear accord over a good year and a half or more, every time they went into a meeting, they raised the case of the missing Americans, of the detained Americans. But the Obama administration was concerned that if they link the two directly, as in if they make this part and parcel of a written agreement, that if the deal goes south, then that would also harm the lives of the Americans being held there, risk the lives of the Americans being held there. So on paper, these two were not linked. In actuality, they very much were. And, these were two separate negotiating tracks, but they coincided. They went in parallel. And it's interesting because if you take a step back and you look at how the secret channel of negotiations with Iran opened up in the first place, and this is a country that the United States hasn't negotiated or talked directly to officially in 30-odd years, it began because of kidnapped or hostages, some would say prisoners, others would say 3 American hikers who were taken by Iranian authorities many, many years ago. So it was that secret channel to bring them back that led to negotiations and the opportunity to finally lead to this nuclear accord. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but they are linked, but they are not officially, linked together.
State Department correspondent Margaret Brennan, thank you so much for joining us on what is a very special day for Amir Hekmati, released after 4.5 years in Iranian prison, and especially for the residents, the community of Flint, Michigan, who are going through some very, very difficult times there with the water contamination issue. To have their hometown son back in the embrace of his family and his friends is a wonderful thing. Margaret Brennan, thank you very much.